And now the question becomes, Devin, where does he go? The wish list reportedly includes the Jets and the Saints. Ian Rappaport reported this morning, which means Adams' agent is putting this out there. Sorry, reporters who get mad when we say that, but I kind of know how the sausage is made. I got me a sausage grinder. I know how it works. The agent's putting out there he wants to go to the Jets, but he's open to other destinations. Look, we've always thought the Jets were the team because it's an Aaron Rodgers reunion. Hey, Devin, I look at that depth chart. Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, Mike Williams. I think one of those guys is going to have to go if Davante Adams shows up. I talked yesterday about Garrett Wilson and his comments about the offense, and Robert Saleh had to address that yesterday. Garrett Wilson running a couple of routes, not getting the ball. I won't be surprised if Garrett Wilson's part of the trade package back to the Raiders or traded somewhere else to help the Jets get the draft pick compensation that goes to the Raiders. Because when you look at the fact that you got 3 starting caliber receivers who have all been great at some point in their career, and Lazard's only great when Rodgers is healthy, but Rodgers is healthy and Lazard is great, there really isn't a spot for Davante Adams. I feel like one of those guys is going to have to go.
Yeah, and I look at Garrett Wilson because he's the youngest of that group with the highest potential and future earnings. And like you said, he's already talked about, like, hey, we're not really doing anything on offense. Like, he made sure once that comment was made of, what they're doing on offense, he's like, I watch football on Sunday. So when you hear that, that's like, all right, there's already an issue. And now to think, all right, you get Davante Adams, so you have these 3 starting receivers. The problem is not that somebody, gets less targets or blah, blah, blah. Somebody becomes receiver 4. So that means third down, you're probably not on the field in most of these situations. That means 2-minute situations. You might sub in for a player or two. So that, to me, becomes the issue of which one of these guys want to have their play count and snaps cut maybe in half. So, yeah, I think, of those 3 guys, I think Garrett Wilson's probably the number 1 guy that says, well, if this guy comes in, forget you trading me. Like, I don't know if he wants to be there. He might like New York and different things. He got drafted there. He's had a great amount of success so far. But he might look and say, like, I don't want to be a part of this new kind of Jets outlook. I wasn't getting the ball before. And now we know once Davante comes, he's going to get at least more than half of the targets to go his way or to drop back. So I'm gonna fall down and be receiver number 2 or maybe number 3 once you factor in the relationship between Lazard and Rodgers. So I could easily see him saying, and I think for the Jets, you look and say, all right, this guy gives us the best chance to get the most from any type of trade and draft capital. So, but the problem is he's a young stud receiver. The Jets really have to say, we're going all in to win a Super Bowl this year or next year if they make that kind of move.
I mean, think about what you're giving up if you're the Jets. And I flash back to 2021 when the Rams went all in to get Matthew Stafford. And yes, they gave up draft pick capital to get Stafford. They also gave up Jared Goff, a guy they didn't view as part of the future. And in fact, they had to tie a first-round pick to Jared Goff to get him off the books. Wilson is ascending. Wilson is part of the solution, not part of the problem. So you're carving out a guy who could be a cornerstone player for you for years to come in the hopes of turning this Aaron Rodgers experiment into something good by allowing him to gather his former teammates and his buddies. And look, I understand at a certain level that's positive, at a certain level it's also negative. Like you were saying, yeah. Garrett Wilson proved himself before Aaron Rodgers ever showed up. Now Aaron Rodgers is there and he's playing, and his targets and catches are being chewed into by the fact that Rodgers wants to force feed it to his buddy, who was terrible last year when Rodgers wasn't around.
Yep.
There's no other way to put it. He was healthy scratch at least once, if not more than once, when Rodgers wasn't there. Now Rodgers is there. I'm going to throw it to my buddy. Now my better buddy is here. Friend number 2 is getting a lot of balls. Friend number 1 is going to get the rest of them. Garrett Wilson's going to be saying, what am I doing here? My first thought when I was communicating with some people last night about how these dominoes are going to fall, like, why does Garrett Wilson want to go to the Raiders? Well, he'll be the guy getting all the passes. Now he may have to share with Brock Bowers, but you're at least going to be involved in the offense more in Las Vegas than you will be in a Jets offense that features two of Aaron Rodgers' buddies and former teammates.
Exactly. And I think at some point in this Jets organization, they have to take control of the part they can control in this destiny or this run. Because of right now, I just wonder, and you look and you say, how happy is everybody with the offense and what they do? Because right now it seems like between Hackett and Aaron Rodgers, you have this mentality of what you want to do as an offense, and it's what's best for them too. Now, overall, is that what's best for the offense? Of, hey, nobody's going to motion, everybody's going to be stationary, Rodgers is going to see it, put the ball where it needs to be, guys just need to win. So then you have this thought of like, well, or if we buy into that and this is what we're going to do, then yes, getting Davante Adams makes a ton of sense, because you would say if we go out there with a group of Mike Williams, Lazard, Garrett Wilson, and Davante Adams, it's going to be really hard for defenses to match that personnel and stop what we're doing. But the problem is, could we be moving in a different direction? Possibly if you had one of these different offensive coordinators, maybe that Saleh has been with before because he was in Kyle Shanahan's offense and he had, Mike LaFleur with him before and it didn't work out, but they didn't have a quarterback that they necessarily thought maybe that could make it work. So I'm starting to think about all of these different things for the Jets of, what if you had this quarterback, but you were able to go in a direction that was more for the decision makers to decide who you bring in, what you do from a personnel standpoint, a coaching standpoint, and build that way off of all of the talent in the room on offense and not just Aaron Rodgers. So if this thing doesn't get worked out, we all know Saleh will get all of the blame. It'll be his fault. He didn't make it work. But you have to start at some point saying, hey, the Aaron Rodgers experience got cut short last year, and now you come into this year of year one, but really year two of this thing because of the injury. And even though the head coach is going to get the blame, we have to look and say, a part of this is happening to make Aaron Rodgers happy, to make this thing go. So if it doesn't go with those decisions, there's got to be some blame for what we try to do just for Aaron Rodgers. No different than when Tom went to Tampa, and the beginning of that was a little rocky. And Sims talked about it on Sunday of the same kind of approach, the old school quarterback that likes to see things, doesn't want a lot of movement going on behind him because it's harder to read the defense with people moving. And then eventually Bruce Arians saying, and I remember being in New England and saying, wow, I know Tom can't like that, being challenged by your head coach in public. Yeah, it was one thing in private when Bill would go, but in public, that was a whole different thing. But I think that might have started to move the needle a little bit towards what they ended up doing and what they ended up becoming as a team, because it kind of sent a message of, hey, we're in this as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Overall, we're trying to win a championship with the guys in this locker room. Yes, we went and got Tom Brady, who's going to make and help all of this happen, but it's still about the team, and we have to do it that way because that's the only way we win a championship. And I think Tom understood that, and you could see that thing really take off as the season ended, and they had some big wins that ultimately led to the Super Bowl.
All right, back to Davante Adams. We have odds as to where he will take first snap after the trade deadline. Very particular and specific proposition here. The trade deadline is coming up on November 5. First snap afterward. I doubt that he'll be traded twice. It's just a weird donut hole. Regardless, the game to be played after the trade deadline, Jets are the overwhelming favorite at -110. Saints are up there. Steelers are hovering. Remember, they tried to get Brandon Ayuk. Commanders are a real contender. I could see them getting involved. Cowboys at 8-1. Mike McCarthy tiptoed around the question yesterday, as he should. Never talk about a guy under contract with another team when he doesn't have permission to shop himself in a trade yet. But then there was a report that the Cowboys don't want him. The Cowboys are out. It's funny that the Raiders are in there. Don't waste your money on that. The Chiefs are in there. I know Jason Garrett was pushing that on Sunday because the Chiefs have a need. I don't know. If it's not the Jets, Devin, where do you think it's going to be?
For one, with the Chiefs, I think we all sit here and would love to see that. But if you're the Raiders, can you really send this guy in the division? I don't think you can do that. I would love to see him go on the Steelers. I think the team has a need to have a guy like him, and I think of trying to game plan George Pickens and Davante Adams. And I think most importantly, they have a strong figurehead as a head coach who will push the team forward. So ultimately, like when you make all of these big free agent moves or these big trades to get these big time receivers, and I know we'll get into it too with Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams, same year. Like when you do that, the ultimate goal has to be like this player taking you over the top. Like to just get a new player and you know, probably he sells a little bit more jerseys, helps bring some more tickets into the stadium. That's great. But overall, if I'm watching, like you said earlier, as a fan, if we make this move, I'm expecting us to be out there competing for a Super Bowl. And you think about the Patriots, when they acquired Randy Moss, they didn't win the Super Bowl with Randy, but ultimately it led to them playing in a Super Bowl. And I think these teams that do this, like that has to be the plan. I think of Mike Tomlin, and you give him a guy like Davante Adams. We saw what Mike Tomlin was able to do with Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell. Like, yes, you know, that team fell short a bunch of times, but now when we got to see those guys in other places, we realized, like, wow, Mike Tomlin's a genius. Like, not only did they win football games, he handled all of those different personalities that when they got outside of that building and that organization, I mean, it wasn't a lot of success for either one of those guys other than AB getting a Super Bowl with Brady. But I just think of Mike Tomlin and Davante Adams going there, how fast they could get on the same page, and it could be all pushed towards that team winning, not all of the other extra stuff. It would be strictly about winning. So that would be fun to see. And I think Mike Tomlin will be able to handle everything that comes along with that, keep the team from not being distracted by anything other than, you know, going out there and winning football games.
I don't know if I've ever told you this before. I know I've said it sitting in this chair. Coaches around the league marvel at Mike Tomlin because when guys who were with the Steelers go elsewhere, and it's not just Antonio Brown, when guys who were with the Steelers go elsewhere, they're like, I had no idea this guy was this way. How did Mike Tomlin keep this guy from being that way for all that time that he was in Pittsburgh? And the report today that Davante Adams is open to other destinations could give the Steelers some hope because, look, you don't want a guy who doesn't want to be there. And I'm not sure the Raiders would trade him to a place he doesn't want to be. Yeah. I think part of this deal that he struck with Antonio Pierce, fresh slate in exchange for if we stink, let me go. It's not just trade me wherever. It's trade me where I want to go. And again, usually I say this with a quarterback, but when you have a big name player like that, you don't want to complicate your own effort to get to a Super Bowl by bringing in a guy who doesn't want to be there, because then you got to deal with that on top of everything else. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.